Good morning. I'm Susan Haney, and it's Thursday morning again, and I welcome you to sit for a few minutes with me and listen to another story about an Old Testament woman. Today I'd like to talk to you about Leah. The story of Leah you can find in the 29th chapter of Genesis, and I encourage you to read that at some point during your day today just to get a different kind of a flavor of what the story is. You probably remember that Leah had a sister whose name was Rachel. And Rachel was a beautiful woman. The Bible says that she was beautiful and she was graceful. What the Bible says about Leah is that Leah had lovely eyes. I've heard lots of preachers and read different commentators who say that they don't really understand what that means, that Leah had lovely eyes. That maybe it was a euphemism, that maybe she was cross-eyed or she had some other problem with her eyes. Well, you know what? Maybe it just meant that she had pretty eyes. Maybe they were kind and tender and sweet. Maybe that was her best characteristic. Her most beautiful trait were her lovely, lovely eyes. You know, it reminds me of people who will say about a girl who is overweight, but she has such a pretty face. Well, you know what? I'm a whole lot more than a face, aren't you? And I'm so offended when I hear people say that about folks that I love in particular. Because, you know, maybe my body doesn't fit the cultural norm for what is shapely and beautiful. But the Bible tells me that I am wonderfully made, and I am. I don't look like I did when I was 18, nor would I really want to. It's okay to show aging and to show that you're different. But more than that, I am so much more than what I look like. You know, I have a sense of humor. I try very hard to be kind and to be generous. There's so much more to me, to those overweight girls who have such a pretty face. And to Leah, who just had lovely eyes. Well, poor Leah. Not only did she know that she was not as beautiful as her sister Rachel, everybody else did too, including her daddy. I know that not all of you have had a good relationship with your daddy, but I did. And I can't imagine your daddy, the man that you love first, knowing that you weren't beautiful, essentially telling you that you were not beautiful, that you were not even marriageable, because he had to marry you off by deceit to your sister's husband. So Jacob had worked for 7 years, well, for a long time, to make the bride price to marry Rachel, the younger sister. And when he had worked out his agreed upon time, he went to his father-in-law, soon to be father-in-law, and his uncle Laban and said, I want my wife now. Well, Laban said, well, we can't let Rachel marry first because she's the younger daughter. So what we'll do, since we don't have any suitors in the wings for Leah, is that we'll give her to Jacob, and then he'll sleep with her on the wedding night, and it'll be done. And he'll have to marry her. He'll have to keep her as his wife. Don't think for 1 minute that Leah didn't know exactly what was going on, because she did. She had to go along with it. She had to do as she was told. Can you imagine being given to a man knowing that he didn't love you, knowing that he didn't want you? And then having to be the one who's there in the morning when he wakes up and finds out that it's the wrong one. And then her daddy, he's so generous. He says, well, let's let Leah have her honeymoon week. And then you can have Rachel too. Gee, thanks, Dad. You give me a whole week without having to compete with my sister. But since everybody knows, yeah, I really did still have to compete with my sister for that week. Gee, thanks. Now, we don't know if Leah loved Jacob or not. But we certainly know that Jacob did not love Leah. God knew that too. So God decided that he would reward Leah for her patience. And he allowed her to conceive children. If you read that 29th chapter of Genesis, you'll find that it seems like every time Jacob shared a bed with Leah, she conceived. And not only did she conceived a son. In that culture, having a son was the most important thing that a woman could do. That should have been the one thing that caused her husband to love her. And every time she delivered a boy child, and she did that 6 times, the Bible records that she said, maybe he'll love me now. Is that not heartbreaking? There was nothing that she could do to make her husband love her. I can't imagine. Although there are some of you who have found yourselves at some point in your life in a marriage that is somewhat loveless. Maybe you realize that there's nothing that you can do to fix your relationship, to make your husband love you. Well, and if you're a man, your wife for that matter too. The hope that I find in this story is that God knew everything that was going on. God was sure to bless Leah with many, many children. Now, those of you who have lots of children and maybe no husband or a husband who's dead, children are not necessarily and really are not any substitute for the love of a husband. But at least it's something. At least people could look at Leah and know that God had blessed Leah because God had given her all of these children. So as you are thinking today about this story, remember that God knows you're suffering, God knows what's going on with you, and God will not allow the end of time to come without blessing you in some way. I hope you have a great Thursday afternoon. Stay dry out there. And we'll talk to you next week when we'll talk a little bit more about Leah's sister, Rachel. Have a great day. Bye-bye.